Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We'll give a few minutes here for folks to join. I see the attendee count clicking up. While people are joining, I'm sure you're coming out of lunch or coming out of a meeting or something like that. While you're joining, I would love for you to open up the chat and let me know a couple of things. Who are you? Number one. Two, what organization are you from? And third, where in the world are you zooming in from today? When you open up the chat, make sure you're sharing your chat with everyone, because everyone would love to know just how far reaching this cause of growing generosity is reaching. It's always fun to see. There's always a couple people that seem to be like up at 3 a.m. on the other side of the globe from us, and that's always really fun and encouraging. So we've got Susan, Carolina Tiger Rescue, Pittsburgh, North Carolina. We've got, it's moving fast, and my mouse will not keep up. Charles Wickham, Pinnacle Living in Richmond, Virginia. We've got Princess Margaret Cancer Foundation in the Great White North, Toronto, Canada. We've got Jeff with Impact Campus Ministries in Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy days and out of your busy schedules. You've got so many other things you could be doing right now rather than tuning in with us. And I appreciate that you're making time to learn about some new opportunities that might help you grow your digital fundraising and grow your impact. So keep blowing up the chat there. Really fun to see everyone who's joining us today. As we get started here, before we dive into the content, I want to make sure that you're aware of a couple of things. Number one, the NEO Summit, the Nonprofit Innovation and Optimization Summit 2023 is coming up on September 19th through 21st. So mark your calendars for that. We would love for you to join us and come on down to Dallas, Texas for a few days where we're going to talk all about how you can grow your digital fundraising. We often bring in speakers from outside of the nonprofit space who have some innovative ideas and thinking in the for-profit world that we think can actually make a big impact for us as fundraisers and nonprofit marketers. This quote from Marissa Stein at Core Reef Alliance: "NEO is obviously a good time." It's hard to miss that when you see stuff like game shows and Wizard of Oz and all the kind of the theming that goes into it. It's not only been really valuable educationally, but it's also been a ton of fun. So we lean heavily into the theme and the experience, lots of games and fun networking activities and all that stuff on top of great educational content. There's a couple little photos of people having a blast at this past NEO Summit. And then this is a quote from Danielle Sparks, who attended our, actually Courtney and I taught a value proposition workshop before last year's NEO Summit. And he walked away from it saying a lot of good things, but specifically this quote: "There's so much information that was applicable. It won't just change the way that we approach our donors, but our philosophy of why we're even talking to them in the first place."
That's so good.
Isn't that huge?
Yeah.
So that's what you can expect from this summit, not just a ton of fun, and it's going to be a ton of fun, but also really deep learnings and insights that are going to help challenge the way you think. Because if we just live at the status quo, we're not going to see results grow. We have to find new ways to challenge ourselves, push the envelope, innovate, and test our way to better results. So we'd love for you to join us. Go to niosummit.com, neosummit.com, and you can get tickets right now. Okay, a couple of housekeeping items before we dive in. Number one, the most popular question that we are ever asked about anything is, are you recording this? And the answer is always yes. So we will send you, tomorrow morning, we will send out the recording of this webinar, along with a link to the slide deck, so you can review these slides if you want to just look at them yourself or share them with somebody else. Feel free to do that. We'll also send you links to any of the resources that we mentioned today. And we should have some time throughout for questions. Definitely at the end, we've got some time card off for Q&A. But if you have questions throughout, feel free to drop them in the Q&A or just kind of give us your live commentary in the chat. We'd love to see your thoughts as we look at a few different experiments. Today's webinar is a little bit different than normal. So if you've been on a Next After webinar in the past, oftentimes we're looking at concepts at a pretty high level, using experiments to show what we've learned works about things like email acquisition or donor acquisition or value proposition copy and all sorts of things, donation pages, donation page optimization. But today we're actually going to dive into some very specific experiments, not with any sort of like larger category or topic or theme, but we just want to show you some of the more interesting things that we've learned through testing over the past 4 or 5 months or so. At Next After, we really do one thing, which is that we help nonprofits grow their digital fundraising. But we do that in 3 key ways. We're a research lab where we go out and we conduct mystery donor studies to try to understand what's sort of the state of the nonprofit space. How are organizations trying to grow giving? What are the different tactics that they're using on a donation page or in follow-up communication to try to boost giving? But just looking at what other people are doing doesn't tell us what actually works. We have to put it to the test and see what actually works to grow giving. We do a lot of that testing optimization work through our digital first agency, where Courtney, who's with me today, and I'll give you a more formal introduction in a moment,
Sure.
runs a lot of that testing and experimentation with organizations that we work with every single day through our digital first agency. And then third, we're a training institute. So we produce webinars like this, as well as courses and all sorts of other things, because our mission is not only to decode what works, but to equip you and as many nonprofits as we possibly can with what we're learning, so you can in turn inspire greater generosity. As of yesterday, and I know this number has gone up even since yesterday, we have 4,841 online fundraising experiments in our library of tests, which is quite a lot. That's 4,841 learnings, things that we have learned either work or don't, to inspire more people to sign up, click, open, give more, give even more, become a major donor, all sorts of different things. Lots of learnings from those. And as I said, we often will wrap these up in these larger courses around different topics. Like we have a brand new one on Google Analytics, but also things like donor acquisition and value proposition, email fundraising, all sorts of things. We've been publishing these quarterly, starting to get on a rhythm of sharing just pure experiments with you on a quarterly basis. I'll share this link with you so you can go grab this book if you want to. But today we're going straight to the source, which is our good friend Winston. This tool is called Winston Knows, and this is the library of experiments that we are actively trying to mine and learn from, and logging new tests that we run and new learnings that we uncover with nonprofits. And so we have 5 different people from our client services team, those who are working day in and day out with organizations on the ground, running digital programs and trying to decode what works, who are going to join and talk about 5 pretty interesting and unique experiments. So Courtney is our executive vice president over our client services team. Courtney, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm
glad to be here.
I'm glad you're joining us, because you know more about these than I do. So we've got a lot of different types of experiments that we're going to look at today. This one sort of starts at what we might call the top of the funnel or the bottom of the mountain, if you're familiar with the donor mountain analogy, which is just how do you get someone to be interested in you by starting with capturing an email. So do you want to tell us about the experiment?
Sure. Yeah.
I'll
take this over. All right. Thrilled to be here. And this is probably my favorite thing that we do is the testing, optimization, and then sharing, because the goal here is not to just share all of these experiments so that you say, oh, cool, that's awesome, good for them. But it's to say, okay, how do I actually apply that to my program? And can I apply it? And what does that look like? And so, what I'm sharing with you today is something that most organizations have, and that is a newsletter. Most organizations have a newsletter.
Nearly every.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, we're not asking you to create any additional content or any kind of, more work is needed here. That's not the case at all. In fact, this organization was a public radio station. They had a daily newsletter that they were sending, and the form for someone to sign up simply said this. It says, we brief you on what you need to know about LA today. This public radio station was, no surprise, maybe located in Los Angeles. And the goal of the newsletter was to do just that. It was to try and communicate all of the things that someone in the LA area would be interested in doing, or maybe information going on. And so when we look at this, we said, okay, well, at least they're talking about, there's relevancy in finding something out today. It talks about everything that we need to know about LA. So I kind of know what I'm going to be receiving, but we really wanted to kind of lean into a couple of factors. We wanted to increase the clarity. So what are they getting? Maybe even frequency of this specific newsletter. And second is, we talk about this all the time, Nathan, is this, people give to people. Is there a way that we could even humanize this sign up form? Now you might be like scratching your head, like, how do you humanize a sign up form? I know, I get it. Like it seems a little bit odd, but take a look at the treatment that we developed. We simply did this.
Let's see, come on.
There.
Sorry, I get obsessed with my animations and they overpowered it.
No worries. So this was our treatment that we developed. And the goal, again, remember, was clarity on what they're going to be receiving and humanizing it. So, making a greater potential connection with the end subscriber. So we included this image of Erica. Erica was actually the person who is sending their newsletters, and Erica is sending them every single day. Now, obviously, this is all automated, but the newsletters came from her name, and we thought, well, gosh, the newsletter is already coming from her. Could we actually show people who Erica is, so that Erica isn't just this, name in my inbox, but I can actually have a connection with her, even just kind of knowing who she is and what she looks like, and that she is that person sending me this valuable content that I have signed up and asked to receive. So we included her image. We even said, hey, I'm Erica. And then we simply said, each weekday morning, I'll help you start your day with everything you need to know about what's happening in LA. Again, I think there's additional testing we can look at with this specific form, but we really did help kind of achieve this idea of clarity in what we're sending and the frequency. We said each weekday, not just weekday, but morning. So it's daily, it's every morning. And even just this idea of the value of the newsletter. So it's not that we're going to just send you a newsletter. No, I'm going to help you start your day with what you need to know. Again, that value goes back to the person who is potentially subscribing. And then, of course, of what's happening in LA. So it tells me what I'm receiving, right? So we've got, the timing of it brings the value back to the subscriber, and then the what, in addition to kind of humanizing this approach. And the results were really, really interesting. We had hoped that it would do well, and actually it did. It did very well. You can see them side by side here. We saw a 36% increase in the number of emails acquired by humanizing this pop-up. So this whole thing of humanizing our communications and email, and the messages that we're saying and that people give to people. Well, the reality is that, this humanized approach works even all the way at the top of the funnel, right? And so as you think about this newsletter that you might have for your organization, what are ways that you could potentially, humanize it? Or maybe even just starting out by clearly communicating what are they receiving. One of my favorite experiments that we did around a newsletter clarification was where we told them all of the things that they're going to receive in the newsletter. It's not just like, hey, sign up to receive the newsletter. We're like, no, you're going to receive stories and events and exclusive updates from us. Like, even if you just start there from a clarification side of things, that might help increase the likelihood of someone to say, not only, yes, I'm interested in this, but absolutely, I want this. And then maybe kind of going into the humanized approach. But very cool experiment. I just love that it kind of goes back to the foundational principle that we always say is people give to people, and just human in all of our communications resonates at all points of the funnel.
I love it. I think it's cool. I mean, there's two things in there I think are really interesting. One, that it's not like a one-off tactic to just get more people to sign up.
Yes.
But it is the holistic experience.
Absolutely.
And we don't have experiments today to go kind of unpack the people give to people humanized email philosophy, but those who have been on previous webinars, you certainly know it well. Sending email from actual people, because we are actual human beings, you're building that real relationship to invest in donors and potential donors as a human being. It's a holistic, it's just cool to see the same tactics we've seen work in the inbox work
totally
in a pop-up on a website.
Yes, absolutely. Right. And I think about when I see this, I'm sure there's questions or people saying, well, we don't even send from a person right now, it's just from the organization. If I could help you put this into action from maybe even a design of experiments, is one, test sending from, maybe you're sending from the organization. So first test from the organization versus a person. And then maybe look at, going back and testing if you find that the person does better from an open rate and click rate, and even unsubscribes maybe are lower. Then what can you do even at the start of that, getting people into your funnel? So if you're sending from a person, then maybe try this approach of humanizing it. So, you find that Nathan's name works. Let's put a picture of Nathan on your pop-up and say, hey, I'm Nathan. I'm going to be sending you your newsletter.
And my name is on too many things.
Yeah, you're right. But people will love your photo. They love you. So, and then maybe adding the clarification on what they're sending, or what you're sending to increase the value to the end user.
Awesome. Cool. Well, one other thing you said I
Yes.
want to highlight too is talking about exclusivity. We
Mm.
often talk about that when we're, talking about asking for a donation and making sure you have a unique value proposition. You don't sound like everybody else. You can give hope pretty much anywhere, but
Yeah.
how are you
Right.
making an impact? But how much that applies to something that, as you said at the front, everybody has a newsletter.
Yes.
So how do you make yours not sound like everybody? I can get a newsletter literally on any website across the entire internet. So what
Absolutely.
is the value
Right.
here?
I always ask the question, when you go to someone's website, like, are you there to sign up for the latest and greatest newsletter? No, nobody is looking to sign up for a newsletter, because really, at the end of the day, no one really wants more email. But if the email has value and it benefits them, then they would. So keep that in mind. So then that goes to well, how do I communicate that? Instead of, sign up for our newsletter, because that's really what you see often.
Oh, yeah.
Is
If
what,
even that. Sometimes
right,
just
sign
newsletter,
up.
email.
Yes, right.
Submit.
So what is in your newsletter? Break it down. So are there stories of impact? Are there exclusive updates that people can receive? Can they stay up to date on whatever your cause is? Again, if these people already, know who you are and are passionate about the cause that you do, then they're going to want to know about that. But we have to communicate that to them, so I would just spell it out for them. I even think about this example of, everything you need to know about what's happening in LA. That's good, but it's not great. I would even say find out the greatest places to eat, the, concerts and events happening within your own city, and, be the first to know to hear all about this, or whatever it might be. Get specific so that the exclusivity factor goes up. And guess what? When you increase the exclusivity, the appeal of the offer goes up and conversion comes to follow. So,
and put it to the test.
Yeah,
That's the only
absolutely.
way you know it works. Awesome. Courtney, this is fantastic. Thank you. I don't know if you saw Greg Wood is going to use a picture of Brad Pitt and say it's him and then send emails that way.
Yeah.
Let us know how that
Well,
works
and I
out.
was going to say, I can't guarantee 100% lift, but I would
You can
hypothesize that
test
it'll do
different
well.
celebrities and things like that. And
Right. Awesome. Thanks, Nathan.
thanks, Courtney.
Yeah.
All right, next up, we're going to bring on my good friend Artie Coolidge, who's our director of optimization here at Next After. He's joining us virtually today. Artie, what's going on? How are you, my friend?
Hey, Nathan, doing well. So excited to be here to just share some fun experiments.
Yeah, I hope you don't mind if I share. Artie has been, both on the client side of working with Next After. You've been, I would say, hopefully you're okay with this term, top fanboy for a long time. I know watching.
Oh, I'm very okay with that term. Yes.
I didn't
It's fun being on this side of the webinar.
And so now you're joining us on one of these webinars. I just love that. That's so much fun. Artie's going to share with us an experiment that was run during, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe during the year-end season. Is that correct?
Yeah. So during those critical final days of the calendar year, where I'm sure many of you guys joining us today, that is your critical season of fundraising. I know from our research, as much as 30 or 40% of your annual revenue might be coming in those final weeks. And so for this organization, they really were trying to turn every needle they could to just jumpstart their giving in those final days. So this is one of my favorite experiments that you picked, Nathan. So
well, I'm excited for you to unpack it a bit. Just a little extra context as well. We released a mobile donation experience research study at the very beginning of this year, and so we were wrapping that up at the same time as this experiment was being run. So I don't know if it actually made the final report, but I wanted to make sure it got some visibility here, because it's really interesting how this kind of small tweak for a mobile user can make such a dramatic impact, especially during such a high urgency time. So I'll put the control up and you can give us the context. Why'd you run this experiment?
Excellent.
It might work. And
yeah. So this particular organization, like probably many of you on the webinar today, really was trying to find a way to increase the conversion rate for their mobile traffic to the donation page. And one of my favorite things to address in the process of giving is the value proposition. Why are we saying someone should give? And oftentimes, in order to properly convey that, your copy ends up being longer on the page. And while this can look fine on desktop, once you go to mobile, it can be a little lengthy, right? And so for our partnership, we kept testing ways with this organization of trying to make the mobile giving process strong while also retaining the strength of value proposition, that clarity, the appeal, the exclusivity of the offer. And so as we were getting ready for the final weeks of their year-end campaign, we hypothesized that we could reduce that friction for mobile users by adding a simple button at the top of the page that would allow traffic that's already motivated to give to bypass that copy by giving a little micro decision right at the top, a little micro yes. So if you can go to the next slide, Nathan, this is what we wanted to add. And that was a little start my gift button. So again, we're thinking, hey, people are getting emails, they're hearing on the radio with this particular organization, appeals to give, they're maybe traveling on the website because it's year end, they want to make their gift. So they're already motivated. What if we take that motivated traffic and just give them an opportunity to make a simple yes, I'm ready to start my gift. And in clicking that, bypass the rest of the page and jump straight down to the donation form. That's it. And so one of the things I loved about this hypothesis was if it proved valid, it's a simple tactical change that can be rolled out during campaigns where there's a high motivated user coming to the page. So these are people who already probably know quite a bit about the organization. They already know why they want to give, how much they want to give. And we're trying to simplify that process for them while not also shortchanging the process for others who have less motivation. I don't want to have to pick and choose in that sense. So if you can go to the next slide, the most exciting part of this was when we ran this experiment side by side and ran it for the full final half of their December campaign, looking at desktop traffic, it really didn't do much at all. Because again, on desktop, the user experience there wasn't a lot of friction from that extra copy on the page, but on mobile traffic, we actually increased donor conversion on the page by 50%. This was huge because we had probably done by this point at least half a dozen experiments trying to increase donor conversion for mobile users. We tried copy, we tried different links of value proposition, we tried different images, all of these different tactics, and none of them seemed to have an impact. But once we gave that mobile user that was motivated to give a simple way to raise their hand and say, yes, I want to start my gift, that additional step in the process actually increased the donor conversion. So to say that this organization was excited is an understatement. Because it was the first time, again, on mobile, we'd seen such a decisive win in conversion.
It's fantastic. And I'm sure a 50% bump in conversions during this high urgency, high traffic season is not bad. That's pretty good.
Not bad. and the thing that I think for anyone listening to this and thinking, well, how do I apply this at my organization or my donation page? The first thing I would say is, do you know what the difference is in the breakdown between conversion rates between desktop and mobile traffic? A lot of times this is something that is overlooked as we're thinking about our pages. But if you go into Google Analytics or even depending on your donor platform, you should be able to see that breakdown and see how are these different traffic sources engaging with my page. And then that can inform how you want to take the next step in testing to optimize that. A lot of organizations, they struggle because the mobile giving process, like we said in our analysis of that, it can be burdensome. It can really suffer because of either outdated technology or just the way everything dynamically adjusts for the screen size on the page. But if we're armed with where we're starting from, what's actually happening by channel on the page, we can then focus on improving in our testing that experience by channel. And that's what I love about this is one solution doesn't necessarily fit all. Through testing and optimization, you can actually find the solution that's tailor-made to fit the best for your donors on the particular device they're engaging with you on.
I love it. And that's really kind of like the macro learning that we took away from that mobile donation research study. As we was trying to mine our library to look at, we don't always run really specific mobile experiments like this one, but there's lots of ones that we've run that you might see a 25% increase in giving or conversions. And the lift was really driven by the mobile device and nothing really happened on desktop, as you're saying. And so we've really started to see like there's the way that someone approaches even something like reading copy on a mobile device is a totally different experience than on a desktop. Your desktop is this big and you're probably scanning and skimming and moving quickly. The mobile phone is this big right in front of your face, and it's really hard to miss the words that are right there on the page. So sometimes copy and even these buttons like this that jump right out at you have even greater impact because they're just in that smaller viewport and more focused and in center. So I love these kinds of experiments. I think they're really insightful. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say one of the things too, I think it's a great reminder for everyone on too, is just the need when you're developing your copy, you're building your donation page to preview it, not just in the desktop window. If you're building your tests and optimize, are you taking the time to click the drop down and preview on an iPad or on a tablet or on a mobile phone? Because that simple interaction can completely change how we view what we're building too. So it's really about getting not just into the mind of the donor, but into the donor's shoes, walking a mile and interacting with your content the way they're going to, and thinking about that funnel holistically so that you can then find opportunities like this. So I hope that helps someone, and would absolutely love to hear if anyone else tests this approach and what their results are.
Yeah, awesome. It all comes back to empathy, it sounds like. So I love that, Artie. Thank you. Before you go and we hand things off to Becca, who's going to join us next, Jason Nab in the chat had a question asking about what platform we used to create this landing page. Specifically, I would even go further and say, what platform did you use to run this experiment? How are you making
So the experiment, yeah, great question. So the experiment was built in Google Optimize, which we love to use because it's free. Of course, many of you watching today probably know that Google Optimize is being sunsetted in the coming months. So not sure what tool I'm going to use after that, but we're looking at several. So stay tuned for that. However, in Optimize, I know that you can add a button like this, Jason, to raise donors. I see you just asked about that. So even if it's not something that's supported by the donation platform, it's often something that's supported as an addition through Optimize. In which case, if it won, you could roll that out as an experience through Optimize, even if the donation platform doesn't have that functionality built in.
For those of you using Google Optimize currently, you can still use it until September 30th, and I'd encourage you to, and we're actively working, seeking out some other partnerships with some of the other testing tools that are out there. I had someone even earlier this week kind of saying like, well, if Optimize is gone, is testing gone? And the answer is absolutely no. It's just maybe the barrier is a little bit higher because there's some costs now to invest in the platform. So we're working on trying to find some partnerships and solutions to help lower that cost to entry and then equip you all to go run even more experiments at the end of September. So you still got plenty of time to run tests now. Artie, thank you. You're amazing. Appreciate you jumping.
Thanks, Nathan. We'll see you later.
I'll see you. We've got Becca Jo coming on, and Becca Jo, is it okay if I call you Becca Jo? Rebecca Josephy is our Vice President of Client Services here at Next After. How long have you been here? 4 years?
3.5.
3.5. Okay.
3.5 years.
3.5 years of
Almost
optimization.
4.
That's
Yeah.
huge. Cool. Well, Becca Jo runs several different client accounts, running lots of experimentation, testing with some large organizations across all sorts of different channels, whether it's donation pages, emails, advertising, et cetera. This experiment that she's going to walk us through touches on recurring giving, which is only becoming like cool in the US in the past couple of years, but has been like the primary way of fundraising in most international markets. So we're kind of catching up. And I'm excited for you to unpack this experiment because it's just like a small way to sort of prompt more people towards recurring giving. So I'll let you take it from here.
Awesome. So the control for this experiment is just like any other donation form you've probably seen. We ask for the donor to select their gift out of the gift array. We ask them to complete their information. We have a checkbox that says, make a monthly gift. And so the original hypothesis for this experiment was adding value proposition to make people want to select the checkbox that said, make this a monthly gift, right? On its own, it kind of doesn't have any legs to stand on. It's just kind of like, well, why should I make it this a monthly gift? Again, thinking about the conversation the donor is having in their mind as they experience this page, there's really not a good reason other than the form says, make this a monthly gift. So we developed a treatment to add a little bit of extra helper text for why someone should choose to make this a monthly gift. So what that looked like on this donation form was just a little box underneath that make this monthly gift checkbox. And we said, hey, this is why we're asking you to make a monthly gift, is because your ongoing support will help us throughout the year to do something that you care about as the donor, right? So we introduced this as the treatment, just a simple line of value proposition to encourage more people to check that box. And again, the original hypothesis for the experiment was to generate more recurring donations. But I want to show you what we learned as a result that we weren't expecting. So again, you have the control on the left, just the normal everyday experience of your donation form. And then the added statement, it's a little subtle, we put a shaded box around that statement just to call attention to it, make sure people see that as they're going through the process and considering the next steps. And we saw a 28% increase in not recurring donations, but in overall donations. So what we learned, and looking at the sample size of recurring gifts, is that we had single digit gifts on recurring for both the control and the treatment. So again, hard to say, yes, this impacted recurring gifts, which again was our intention. That was what we wanted to see. But what we learned was even more helpful in, hey, adding value proposition, even throughout the process as someone's giving a donation, having one extra sentence helped people say yes, because they saw the impact of their gift. Again, there's some different ways we're testing this now, calling out more, reasons why someone should give monthly, because we do still want to find a way to crack the case of how we get someone to say yes to recurring. But this helped us learn that adding that value proposition helped more people say yes in general. So we were able to increase revenue 20% with 80% level of confidence just by making this simple change on the donation form.
It's pretty incredible. I mean, you said a few things that I think are really, really interesting to say again and make sure it don't get missed. One, I mean, talking about, the volume of recurring giving that's coming in, unable to kind of get a statistical, like a 95% level of confidence that you see that result over time from recurring giving, but still understanding the impact that it's making. There's some little learnings about testing and optimization in there that are good nuggets. But you talked about the conversation that's happening on the page, and to throw back to kind of what Courtney was talking about earlier, this holistic experience of communicating with a human on the newsletter sign up form, hearing from a person in the email, and those things leading to better results. But the same thing is happening even on our donation pages, where it's not just a transaction, it's a logical, meaningful conversation that's happening. You want to unpack that a little more?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, just as you're developing your donation page copy, even beyond the copy itself, but the actual form itself and the functionality of each of these steps, you can consider how this conversation plays out in the mind of your donor. So even looking at this page and going, where else can we optimize? Telling someone, make your gift now, versus asking them, are you interested in making a gift today? If so, you can, choose the amount you want to give below. So guiding them through each step of that process, we've found through, again, testing, sometimes people are going through this, they're treating this experience like the page is alive. If someone called you on the phone, you wouldn't say, make your gift now. You would say, well, how much would you like to give today, right? So having that context as you're creating the form, walking through it, making sure it makes sense. If someone's going through that process unguided, will they still feel like someone was helping them through each step along the way? And do they feel like they have enough information available to make the decision to say yes?
I love Ben's got a comment. Well, Whitney jumped in, thinks it's amazing that such a small tweak can make that kind of an impact, which we see that kind of thing oftentimes.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it's the small things that lead to major lifts. Ben's comment is really interesting here. Thinking about what to test next, because I never want us to assume, I think you'd agree with this, that we're done just because we got a lift.
Exactly.
There's always room to keep testing and optimizing. Ben's suggesting here, what if you even got more specific than ongoing support, but talking specifically about like a monthly recurring giving, what does that do? And because ongoing support could be, you give every couple of years.
Sure.
That's ongoing.
Sure.
but it's not exactly what we're looking for in this case. What would you test next in this case, or maybe what have you started to test?
Yeah, a couple things. One great point, Ben, having clarity around, your ongoing support could impact one-time or recurring gifts. And that could, if I make a gift today, you're telling me basically, okay, well, your support's going to help us throughout the year. We don't specifically call out your monthly gift would help us accomplish these goals. We are doing some testing on different value proposition that closely aligns with the offer that the visitor arrives on this page from. So matching up the value proposition, again, of what the donor wants to do with their gift based on what we learned about them when they took a survey or signed up for an ebook. So making this statement different depending on what the user experienced and what their interests and motivations were for engaging with our organization in the first place.
Cool.
So definitely more tests in the work. This is not the end all be all. And again, the green arrow here was surprising. Again, not what our overall goal was. We still want to figure out how we can get more people to say yes to recurring. But what we learned is adding value proposition along the way throughout the process, again, helped more people say yes to giving one time.
Awesome. Well, keep us posted as you get those other tests run,
Will
and we'll
do.
bring them back here and we'll share them on the next webinar once they get launched. So thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me.
We've got Courtney Kincaid coming in next to talk about a pretty interesting experiment. To give a little bit of background, Courtney is a digital strategist here at Next After. Again, working day in, day out, figuring out how do we optimize programs and get better results. And yeah, test our way to green arrows and going up and to the right.
Yeah.
This experiment, I'll give like a bit of the background, I'll hand it to you. I thought was really a really good example of, I said it up front, when we do these kind of like mystery donor research studies, we're always looking for what are the interesting things that people are doing and nonprofits are doing to try to grow giving. But just seeing something cool and interesting doesn't tell us what works. We can't just assume because someone else is doing it that we should do it too, and it's probably working for them. It might not be working for them. They just don't even know. So, or maybe they're testing it. So we have to take these ideas and we have to put them to the test. And Courtney did exactly that with this experiment. So can you break it down for us?
Yeah, so this particular experiment, really with this organization, we weren't trying to solve a problem. I think a lot of times when we come and we start testing, it's because we're trying to fix a problem or an area that needs improvement. And that's not to say don't test when there's a problem. That's by far you should. But this test reminded us of like how sometimes testing can actually expose the problems that we didn't realize actually happened.
Yeah,
so for some context, our team has been really big fans of Wikipedia. They actually have they publish a fundraising report every single year where they have all of these experiments, and because it's Wikipedia, they can run millions, it seems, at a time.
Yeah, it's like the nerdiest part of like the holiday season is like, ooh, what's Wikipedia testing?
And I think it comes out in like October. So this year in October, if you're looking, check Wikipedia. And that's incidentally what caused us to like push over into testing this particular concept. So for a control, we actually, with this organization, we tested into this particular sticky bar, where you see it says, will you be one of the 20 donors needed in the next hour? And that 20 actually becomes 19 and then 18 based on, fancy code stuff that I don't fully understand, but somehow it's able to do a countdown. And we had tested into that and it was working, and we were seeing people convert from this sticky bar.
And this is sticking to the top of the page, no matter where you scroll, it's still.
Yeah, top of every single page, not covering the navigation. And so that was the control that we had tested into over the years. But we finally were pushed into the edge of, over the edge of testing this particular treatment. If you have been on Wikipedia during like November and December, you probably saw it, because that's what happened to me. It was like a Saturday night. And I saw this commercial for a scary movie, and I don't like scary movies, but I have FOMO and genuine curiosity. And so I went to Wikipedia. Nathan does not know this, and that's why he's laughing. I went to Wikipedia. I experienced this as a user, and I thought, wow, that's very bold. And
I wonder if it works. And
So when you pitch this experiment, I'm pretty sure that the picture that you sent along was like Chris Evans.
yeah,
like,
I went
Wikipedia profile or
to
something.
Chris Evans' Wikipedia page. If I mean, I can include that video. I still have it. You can send it out so you can see its functionality. But
I love it.
I was like, what's less polarizing than Chris Evans?
That was great. Yeah.
Um,
Late night reading Chris Evans Wikipedia entry.
That's
Cool.
what happened.
Whatever.
You know, that's what our developer said as he was working on it.
Oh, I love
So
it.
we tested with this organization. Again, we weren't trying to solve a problem. We were just curious if it worked. And boy, did it. Just a little bit closer to see the messaging here. It has this headline, "We ask you humbly, don't scroll away." And yes, that is to scale. It was very large and in charge. And it says, "Sorry to interrupt you. We humbly ask you today to help change the world." This isn't the first time we've asked recently, but only 1% of our readers actually give to help transform lives. This organization has a massive news website that has tons and tons of traffic. And so we were actually able to do the math to figure out how many, what percent of their file actually
Interesting.
gave.
Yeah.
And so we presented that. We asked for like a $5 minimum gift, and needless to say, remember, this is our control, that counter sticky bar that is dynamic. And then we have our treatment here, and yeah, it was a 334% increase in donations. And I think it validated, according to Winston, in less than 5 days. We obviously ran it longer than that so we could get more transactions on it, but it exposed that this particular organization had used the tactic of sticky bars so often that their audience was desensitized to it. It was like they had a sticky bar going every single month with different things, and they would change the messaging. And when it came time to do a fundraising ask through a sticky bar, people were like, well, it's another petition, or it's another like random thing. And so they were just kind of desensitized. And so this presented it in a new way for their readers to experience. And it really made the case like, oh, wow, only 1% of people are actually giving towards this mission.
Yeah. So I know there's like a lot of different kind of variables that are moving. And I know a common question when you see an experiment like this is like, well, how do you actually know what worked? And that's where there's almost like two different approaches to testing and optimization. There's, if you really just very specifically want to learn something very nuanced, well, yeah, you got to control a lot of variables. We're trying to optimize in the moment during that campaign to get the best results we can, and had a strong, fundraisers, marketers intuition that this might work. And what you said is really interesting, that sometimes you can just maybe get like banner blindness when you have the same sort of thing on repeat, and this injects something different and new. And although maybe you might suggest that, well, does it work one time? Does it work a second time?
Yeah.
It really worked the first time. And so we can run it back and you can optimize on it and test all sorts of new things.
This particular organization has another high urgency campaign coming up next month. And so we are actually going to be testing this again because it works so well during calendar year end. And the difference with this upcoming campaign is that it's a recurring campaign. And so we are not only going to test to see how it works with a recurring message, but also some of the other variables, because the internal questions when we presented this internally to our team were, well, was it the placement? Was it the language? Was it all of these other things?
Was it this.
So it's leading to more secondary testing with not only this organization, but I think there's 3 others that we have in the pipeline to run it in the next month or so.
Cool. Well, sometimes you got to take that big swing in order to see the result. And when you've optimized as much as you can over your control, you take a big swing and you hope for the best, and it's informed by data and all that. And then you continue to iterate and optimize until the next big thing. So I think that's such a cool model to follow. What a great experiment. Thank you so much for sharing and running it. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
We're going to bring in Jeff Giddens next, who's going to kind of bring us home with one final experiment for today. Jeff is the president here at Next After, overseeing all we do in terms of trying to optimize programs with nonprofit organizations and beyond. So Jeff, come on in. I'll hand this off to you.
All right.
You may have seen a fiery conversation on LinkedIn in the past week about
fiery.
Should you have donors, or ask them at least, cover their transaction fee when they make a donation. And so you've run at least one, if not multiple experiments around
Yeah.
this, and I would love for you to just unpack this for us.
Yeah, for sure. So, there are things that creep into our kind of field division, like tools that pop up because they're new features. And one of the things that I love about new features is testing them. There's sort of this innate belief sometimes it's like, we have this new feature, we should activate it. It's inherently good. And it's like, well, is it? And I've wondered for a while about this concept of donor covers fees. I'm not for it or against it. I see the benefits of it for sure. I have a small nonprofit of my own. And it is interesting when you get a gift and you see those fees transacted.
Yeah,
Personally, you feel it.
sure.
But when I give a lot of gifts in the nature of our work, not because I'm like the world's most generous person, because we're testing donation forms. And so I'm like repeatedly.
World's most generous, like $5 donation.
Yeah, right. World's cheapest, most frequent donor. We just get a lot of gifts. And so we see donation forms. And I think that one of the biases that we develop here at Next After and as fundraisers in general is like, we're really close to it and we forget what most people experience. So ultimately, we had a client who had a donation form. And this is a system called Antidote. You can see it there. It's not a secret. Antidote's a great giving system. But they introduced a feature and sent a marketing email that said, hey, now you can select the option and give the donors the option to cover the 3% fee, right? And so we're like, cool, let's test that. I wonder about the impact of that. And so interestingly, we use their default setup. It looks a little bit different than some of these.
Okay.
Their default setup says, first off, cover the processing fee. It does not say the amount. It's not like cover the $3 that's dynamic based on your gift or whatever.
Yeah.
But it kind of gives you this like education bit right here. Like credit card companies take a small percentage of your donation. This means less money towards the mission. By covering this fee, you can make sure 100% of your gift goes towards protecting future generations.
Yeah.
And this language gets in like that much bigger, like Dan Pallotta conversation of like, should 100% go towards mission or,
Sure.
All that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a very big, it's like a heady thing to ask someone when they're right here, like they're about to give their gift, right? Like you've propelled them through some sort of funnel or copy on the page. They're about to give. And so we said, let's test this. And so we didn't make any changes to it. We just used the default messaging. What we found was there's a 39% decrease in donations.
Yikes.
When we added that.
Yeah.
So the question was why? And I posted this on LinkedIn this week and got like 80 comments on this post. You should go find it and join in the chatter or just read it. It was very interesting. 100% of people who worked at a donation platform were like incensed. But I also thought it was interesting that no one had people had tested different things. One of the guys from Fundraise Up was super insightful on it. And they had tested a lot of stuff. Like they said, adoption rate is 80%. And I'm like, I didn't get an answer to the specific question. I was like, did you test it without it and with it? Because yes, adoption rate may be 80%, but that's only counting the people who gave. How many people left, like didn't engage at all? Because I think there's something that happens here. My hypothesis is this: John Powell, a good friend of ours in a bunch of our courses, he used to talk about like when you're giving, you're having this magical experience where you're like seeing almost the world made right as it should be. Like whatever cause, if people are hungry, like you're able to fix that with your money.
Yeah.
Right. And it's almost this like spell, he said. And he's like, you can't break the spell. Like,
Yeah.
you can't bring them
I
back
think
to
there
reality.
was a tea analogy in there too.
Yeah. Like you can't, they're having this magical, they're like floating and they're like, you've got them to suspend reality to give their own hard-earned dollars away. And they're going to get something tangible. They're going to get a good feeling and the knowledge that they've used that, but like all the benefit goes to someone else. Right. And this is probably like in the same browser where they have a tab open and they can go buy a pair of shoes for $50 or something. Right.
Yep.
It's like they get a tangible benefit for that, but they don't for this. And so he's like, don't break the spell. Like you've got them there. And my hypothesis on this, one of them is that this processing fee breaks the spell. Very simply, it like brings it back down to reality and reminds them that there are fees and other bad things in the world that we don't like, right? Or that it may remind them that not all of their gift is gonna go to charity.
Sure.
Like maybe, you've seen enough pie charts of like what percentage of our gifts go.
Yep.
It's like, I think donors know. I don't think they like to be reminded of it particularly,
Sure.
but they know like it costs, you have to have, someone had to set this donation form up.
Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't feel good to know like, hey, I'm going to give this gift and only 80% of it's going to do something I care about. Like,
Right. So that's part of it. But I also think there's a little bit of like nickel and diming here with someone who's being generous with you. One thing in the LinkedIn comments that consistently came up, they're like, as gift size increases, adoption rate decreases. And I was like, yeah, because I'm giving you 10 grand and you're asking me to tack an extra $300.
Yeah.
Like that you would
That's a
never
big
do that in person.
No.
If someone was like, hey, Nathan, here's a $10,000 check. You're like, great. As I process this, you get 300s in your pocket? Like, can you cough that up too? Like you would never do that, but we're so comfortable to do it online. And
Yeah.
sometimes we just blindly accept like the new feature that gets put in there. So
Yeah.
like, I'm not for or against this.
Sure.
I just wanted to see how it would impact. And I was actually kind of shocked to see that it had this big of a valid
That's
impact
huge.
on donations. And it is fascinating. We tested this with another organization that had it on the form. So we did the inverse. And theirs just said, cover the amount processing fee. And it
Yeah.
changed how, based on what you typed in, it was 3%. And so, we tested that by removing it. And we tested on 2 different pages. And one page was a 21% lift. The other page was a 38% lift. And so in this case, adding it decreased donations. In
Yeah.
those 2 cases, removing it increased donations. And those were acquisition funnels. This was like a main donation page.
Gotcha.
But it's
So mostly
fascinating.
new donor versus potentially lots of repeat donors. Just
Yeah,
for clarity.
I think that the hard thing for donation platforms is that they're like the receptacle. They're at like the end of the process to collect the gift,
Mhm.
right? And so there's a lot happening outside of that. Like if your donation form has an optimization, like a tabbed form or like something that we've seen in other tests, and they put that into place, that is helpful because it'll ostensibly increase your conversion rate. I still think you should always test those things.
Sure.
Because organizations and donors are different, but it's kind of it's just kind of interesting, like the perception of a technology company who like wants to sell you their product. Lori said, Fundraise Up's AI now does predictive offerings to pay the fees, and they say they'll present it to the right person at the right time. Sounds interesting.
Mhm.
I would love to still test it, like
Yeah.
none at all, or does it actually like negate what we see in this experiment,
Yeah.
right? And I don't want to
Because many-
overgeneralize this. I don't want to
Sure.
say that like doing this every time is going to reduce conversion.
Yeah.
We tested it
Even
3
within a
times.
specific organization, it's probably different
Pages.
funnel to funnel, new versus returning, all that stuff.
In fact, if you have this available in your software and you want to test it, I would love to expand our body of research on this. Lori said she'll try turning it off 30 days and see what happens. Yeah, please give us all the data. We'll help you put that together.
Yeah.
But I just think that overall, like my takeaway from this is, these small changes that kind of come packaged up in technology or sold as solutions, right? Because you think about it, Fundraise Up's competitors are other donation forms,
Mhm.
and there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. Sure, I love it. And we actually need that competition to make better
Make them
donation
even better.
forms.
Yeah.
But they're selling themselves. They're trying to get buyers based on these different feature sets. But like, is the feature set good? Is something that we should ask. And does it help for our organization or not? And I do like organization or donation platforms that allow these to be optional, because you can test it. You can split traffic. One page has it, one doesn't. You can just go find out.
Yeah, makes total sense. All right, thank you, Jeff. We're going to move on to some Q&A here. I see there's several things kind of in the chat that we can circle back on. There's at least one in the Q&A panel. If you wouldn't mind, jump over to the Q&A tool. If you've got questions for myself or for Jeff, and it could be about any of these experiments, we can kind of go back to them too, as we got about 5 or 6 minutes before we wrap up. Drop those in the Q&A tool so we can make sure we keep track of them and we can get you answers. I do want to show you this link as you're getting those questions in. If you want to look at just some more interesting experiments, you'll find all of these in this journal, plus another 10 or 12. You can go to nextafter.com/best new research, or pull out your phone, scan the QR code. You can get the latest online fundraising research journal. We'll also send this link out in the follow-up email tomorrow, so you can grab that as well. And then I'll just leave this on the screen as well. If you're marking your calendar for Neo Summit, make sure you grab your tickets as soon as you can so you can get the best price possible. There's also like a t-shirt contest, t-shirt design contest running at the moment. So you should be able to find that.
If you win, you get free tickets, right?
You get a free ticket if you win. I think maybe even 2. Don't quote me on that, but you might even get 2.
Be there. It's going to be awesome.
It's gonna be a blast. Okay, I'll pull up the Q&A tool and then we'll chat about these for the next few minutes. This question from Susan actually comes from the very first experiment we looked at with Courtney, which is looking at the newsletter pop-up and version B adds, "Hi, I'm Erica," and introduces that human element to it. Here's a question. Susan says, "We tend to be very cautious with our lists." I assume that's email lists. "Should you keep the newsletter lists separate from other email lists, or do you add them to all lists and then allow people to opt out of fundraising lists if they want to?" What do you think?
Great question. Number one, I think it's very hard to get people into donor lists if you don't ever give them the opportunity to give.
Yep.
And so you may not want to opt them into everything. But I also think on the flip side of that, it's very good to get people to opt into the stuff that you normally just send them. We have a client who saw an increase in unsubscribe rate, and we looked at why. It was because they have a newsletter that goes out weekly, but people never opted into it. It was just something that they got sent. And so there may be sins that you do that are not like weekly regimented, like a product. I want this, and that's okay, I think, to send to people when it's like opportunistic. But I think there's a value in getting people to say yes, even if that means your newsletter list may be smaller, which is hard because sometimes you're like, I want to grow the list. Like growing it from a person who's a confirmed opt-in for that matters.
Far better than just opting in 100,000 people into a newsletter they didn't know they're going to get.
Well, I think that it's not, there's the point of it that looks at it from the perspective of like, oh, they may not want it. But the other way to look at it is like, these people actually want it, right? So your engagement will be true. It may not be like, you may not get as many raw clicks, but your click-through rate will be better because they wanted it. So
that makes total sense.
We miss that sometimes.
There's a question here from, I'll jump over to the chat here. Ben asked this question as kind of a follow-up to talking about transaction fees and things. Have you tested with any clients using a post-donation pop-up that has to cover the fee? Ben says, I've seen make your monthly gift or make your gift monthly instead. What have you seen with those kind of like post-transaction?
Paul Dietzel, who's the founder and CEO of Antidote, said he wanted to test it after the gift. He saw that comment. He's like, I'd like to test this. So I need to follow up with him and see if he has a client or one of our clients that uses that platform that we can test that with.
That'd be super
I don't know. My hypothesis is that adoption would drop off because like nothing kills a funnel like saying thank you. Like you're done, mentally checked out, you know? So I think there'd probably be less adoption. It's an interesting question of like, instead of putting it right before they give, can you get them to give it after? There's probably some technical things like, could the token stay open so they could process that on top of the gift, or is it a separate transaction? I don't know. I asked a guy from Fundraise, which is a great company, Justin Wheeler, our friend's company. I was like, why do you care about covering the fees so much? Because he said he was a hardcore advocate for it. And I was like, I've never met anyone who's hardcore about like donor covering the fees. And he said, it's like it's the fastest way to like offset a cost. And I get where he's coming from because it's true. And truly like the platforms care because they're actually the ones that create the cost in that way. Like they're trying to offset their fee. In fact,
justify what you're investing in the product.
Totally. But I do think that sometimes like as a industry, we can be more. Brady Josephson said this to me on the phone. He called me about the LinkedIn post. It's like, why did you make everybody mad? He said, as an industry and nonprofits, like sometimes we can be so much more concerned with saving and not as concerned with growth. Right. And those two things become diametric. Someone else commented and said, apparently this is big in Canada, but you can tip after the donation. And it's not to cover the fee for your transaction. It's literally like, will you cover the cost of this fundraising platform? And I just think it's a really interesting, if you take everything out to human behavior, like I don't think we would do that. And I think we underrate sometimes. We're trying to humanize these interactive experiences online. But if you wouldn't do it in person, like I don't think you should do it. I get furious when I go to the Froyo shop with my kids, frozen yogurt. And like,
And
I
it's the
get the
self-serve
cup,
anyway,
I
and-
self-serve, I put my own toppings on, they weigh it, and then they're like $10. And I'm like, run it. And they're like, would you like to tip? And I'm like,
iPad.
for what? Like, I just did it all.
Yeah.
But in a way, that's kind of a similar concept. All that to say, Ben, like, I would love to test to cover the fee. You know, you may get lower adoption, but it might be, it definitely wouldn't prevent or send people away from getting
Mhm.
whatever that test did.
And then the question becomes, okay, maybe you don't harm conversions, you get some people to cover the fee, but then is that the best next thing to ask somebody to do at that point?
Is it really what you want?
Yeah.
Right?
Because
Because go back to the $10,000, I'll say, like, take a $10,000 donor.
Mhm.
Like, they just gave you a tremendous gift. It's a lot of money. And you really want 300 extra bucks from
Would
them?
you give a little bit more, please?
Because what does that imply? To me, it implies like your gift wasn't big enough.
Yeah.
You know, like, we need you to stretch a little bit more. And it's just
Yeah.
like, man, I don't know if you really want to do that.
Right. These are fantastic questions. I see Lori's commenting on tipping getting out of control. I absolutely agree with you. H. Lynn would like us to post, I believe, the LinkedIn, or post a link in the chat for the research comparison on the previous screen here. I could go
Oh,
back to
the
that. So
journal.
you can grab that too. Yeah, the journal. So you can grab that, dive into some additional experiments if you'd like to. If you got any follow-up questions as you just kind of think on these things that we've talked through today, just shoot me an email. I'll send you an email in the morning with the slide deck and the recording and all that stuff. You can just hit reply to that. Send us your questions if you've got follow-up thoughts and commentary. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for making time out of your busy schedules to join us today. We wish you the best of luck as you actively work to test and optimize your way to bigger and better results so you can feel greater impact. So thank you all. Appreciate you all. We're rooting for you.
Let's
Have
go.
a great rest of your afternoon.
See ya.
Peace.